This is a press statement on the spiraling state of insecurity in the country. And we'd like to state that the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is concerned with the prevailing state of insecurity in the country. We take this opportunity to sincerely condole the families and families of the affected personnel, security personnel, civilians, humanitarian personnel, and everybody who has lost their lives during these last couple of days. We also take this opportunity to condole the families of the military officer who lost his life at the hands of the suspected militants in Mombasa. We condemn the brazen attacks against all security enforcement agencies which have caused alarm and panic among members of the public. We note with grave concern the disrespect for the right to life and property, as well as the disrespect for the state security apparatus as manifested through the felling of security agents and reported attacks on security installations. It is alarming that these violations are taking place despite the country's robust Bill of Rights and substantial investment in the security sector. We condemn the attacks which continue to cause massive displacement of innocent civilians, who include vulnerable children, women, and the elderly, disrupting the socio-economic activities and livelihoods, thus subjecting citizens to further human rights violations such as the denial of the right to food, the right to security, the right of movement, the right to education, and the access to health. The government plays a vital role in any society by ensuring that security, law and order, as well as protection of human rights are secured. This mandate is exercised through various government organs: the National Police Service, the National Intelligence Service, and also the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination. The ministry's core functions include maintenance of law and order, prevention of and detection of crime, peace building and conflict resolution at grassroots levels. The National Intelligence Service is mandated to collect security intelligence and to enhance national security in the country. The National Police Service, on the other hand, is mandated to maintain law and order while complying with constitutional standards of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The roles of these two agencies, the NIS and the National Police Service, are complementary in nature. While the law stipulates this, there still remains a gap in their collaboration, as is evidenced by continuing attacks. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights notes that the following are some of the underlying causes of conflict. In the North Rift, these include boundary issues or boundary disputes, competition for natural resources, and the recent discoveries of natural resources such as oil in the North Rift. In the coastal region, and the larger coastal region including Mombasa, the Commission is concerned with the upsurge of radicalization among the youth, which has been used to lure them in search of economic empowerment and agitation for secessionist claims. Conflicts have also stemmed in the recent past from ethnic differences or inter-clan violence, and this has been happening in the big part of northern Kenya. Political polarization of conflicts exacerbates matters, giving way to opportunistic terrorism operatives in our midst. We raise the following human rights concerns arising from recent and continuous issues of insecurity in the country. First is the right to education. We note that the attacks, especially in Kapido, came at a time when the Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, the KCSE, are underway, and Kenya Certificate of Primary Education, KCPE, commence tomorrow. Learning and national exams have been disrupted in the affected areas, denying many children equal opportunity to realize their constitutional right with their counterparts elsewhere in the country. With regard to disarmament, it has come to our attention that despite the need for continuous disarmament of civilians, especially in the Northern Rift and elsewhere in the country, the exercise has been selective, hindering the full realization of its objectives and long-term peace in the regions. This has continued to feed the belief held by certain members of the community that there can be no peace without justice, as perpetrators continue to use guns for counterattacks. On the management of security forces, the Commission is aware that the Kenya Defence Forces were deployed yesterday in the current affected area in the Northern Rift following the Kapedo attack. We are concerned about the procedures of deployment and whether it was done with parliamentary approval as required by the law. Further, we are concerned about the inability of the Kenya Police Service to adequately and effectively deal with the rising insecurity in the country. This calls into question the levels of logistical preparedness and expertise among police service and their ability to effectively manage the endemic incidents of insecurity in the country. With regard to actors in the conflict, in our previous investigations, the commissions and other actors have shared and mentioned names of players of varied conflicts with relevant institutions, and none are brought to book. We put on notice political and community leaders and other culpable perpetrators who are bent on funding insecurity in the country. The Commission is closely monitoring their contribution, their utterances, their influence to the current insecurity in per se, and will take legal and other appropriate action for accountability as soon as our investigations are complete. With regard to the humanitarian crisis, following the recent attacks, there is a growing humanitarian crisis that requires urgent interventions from the relevant government and other humanitarian agencies, such as the Red Cross. We note that the humanitarian agencies have become targets of attacks, hindering their deployment and service delivery, and therefore worsening the situation. Our recommendations are that the government issues, that the Ministry of Education develops a strategy of dealing with education for pupils and students in affected areas to ensure they receive equal opportunity. That radicalization of youth needs a specific action plan to deal with it, as opposed to employing knee-jerk, everyday security strategies. That in restoring calm in affected areas, security agents should respect human rights and the dignity of every person. The mishandling of civilians in Mombasa was, as was depicted in the media in the wake of the attack of the barracks, will only further the hardening of the resolution of persons towards security agents and be counterproductive. That is it, and thank you very much. The next commissioners, Commissioner Jedida Warobio. Thank you.
So basically, if you have questions, you can pose them to us. But what we wanted to let Kenyans know is that the situation, especially in Baringo and the North Rift, is something that we've been following very closely. So it's not the first time that we're being seized of these matters. Actually, on February last year, we sent out a memorandum to the Inspector General of Police detailing the issues that we talked case of security in this country is absolutely fundamental. So as a commission, we are really monitoring this very closely because we feel there are gaps in the way that the government is handling the whole security sector. And hence, the seemingly endemic attack that we're being subjected to from people stating what are selling the chairs reminiscent to the Momau, to the Majimaji rebellion in the coast. It was true that they walked to the barracks with machetes, they hoped that they would be attacked, to the opportunistic incidents of terrorism, to what has happened in Kapedo and all that. So as a commission, the right to security is a fundamental right, and what we want the Kenyan people to know and the government to know is that we will continue working in this sector to ensure the safety and security of Kenya. So that's essentially what we're doing. At the end of the year, we're going to release the report of what we're doing in different counties, specifically insofar as security is concerned. So if you have issues and questions to pose, you can pose them to us. Yes, sir.
You're going to release it at the end of the year. This, she talked of investigating some of the issues with
Yeah, maybe we'll take a few more and then we'll just respond to that. Yeah.
I think you mentioned something to do with the gaps in the security operations in Kenya. Could you specific steps, like for instance, would you want heads to roll? There are people who should probably be vacating their offices because of the increased attacks. And also the issue of the radicalization of being the opportunity for terrorism. That attack which happened in Nyali on Sunday, you see probably it was a terrorism attack, or what exactly, or how do you view it?
Okay. I think what we said, and you see, we feel there is inaction, even when certain specific actors have been mentioned, especially political actors, as being behind the continued state of insecurity, especially the North Rift region. So you're right that this is information that we have in our custody. At least we saw some movement because there was a little bit of courage when we saw some political leaders being arraigned before the courts of law. I think that is the right movement. What we really need is once this information is fully made public, the key actors and players, most of whom are politicians who are really using their ethnic communities for political gain, will then be fully exposed and they face the full strength of the law, as opposed to us making these recommendations over and over again, pointing out who these people are and then nothing is taken. So I think we are quite concerned about that, and this time around we want to ensure that action is taken against the people who have been mentioned, that serious and relevant investigations are done so that they don't continue funding those incidents, either in the name of traditional practices like cattle rustling or whatever else they want to hide behind. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The other thing is, which we'd like to say is actually that the state of insecurity in this country is complex because the contributory factors are varied. And in any one area, you might have more than a multiplicity of factors that are really feeding the violence. There are issues of ethnicity or ethnic pride, and even ethnic expansionist schemes. There are issues of cultures of violence. and especially like cattle rustling, which has been that's not a new problem. There are issues of seizing of territories, and all these have got different dynamics given the new issue, the development of devolution. With devolution has kind of sparked its own momentum of conflict, because very many people see opportunities that were not there before. We are seeing a rise in inter-county or county-to-county kind of conflicts, and sometimes this is also erupting in violence. There's the issue of newfound wealth and talk of discoveries, or talk of the existence of huge natural resources, and competition for this also fuels conflict. And we are talking about all the radicalization of youth, high state of unemployment, rise in poverty, and all these are ingredients for those who would want to infiltrate and take advantage or be. We have been referring to terrorists as opportunistic, because global terrorism today takes advantage of existing fissures in social cohesion. Where there is no social cohesion, they look for the dividers, for the wedges, and just amplify those and use them. So in the face of global terrorism, and terrorism even in our own soil, and sometimes overreaction in terms of counter-terrorism measures or counter-conflict measures, they may be, if the government reaction is too much or too harsh, or it is too little, inadequate or insufficient, then both sides of that pendulum just really play into the hands of those who would want to divide and sustain conflict. And the complexity of it all is the fact that government countermeasures must be exactly right. Getting that balance is sometimes illusory, and that therefore we are aware that this is a complex matter, and we are not making we would not want to make like a sensationalist kind of recommendations of saying this head must roll, that head must roll, but really encourage that the measures must be planned. The strategies have to be well thought out and well planned with a long-term kind of strategy. If these crises are countered on a need-be basis as they arise, then the actors, on the other hand, those who would start the conflict, will be ahead of those who are reacting. And that we feel that's why we were mentioning the role of the National Intelligence Service and the role of the National Police Service as complementary, so that countermeasures can be comprehensive and the whole approach can be comprehensive. Without security, no human rights can be enjoyed. Whether it's whatever rights we want or we speak about, whatever rights are enshrined in our Bill of Rights will be useless if our borders are not secure and if national security is not secured.
Yeah, I think on that you're also asking about, just to reinforce what the chair said in terms of, this is not a new recommendation. I think over time we've said we have these different arms of the security apparatus who seem to be speaking discordantly when they should be speaking in a joint manner to address the issue of security. And we are aware of the challenges that being posed by that centralized command structure, which Kenyans wanted under the new constitution. It's taking a little bit too long, but I think it's high time that the different formations within the police service really gelled, as it were, so that we feel safe as a country. And then, again, the whole issue of these conflicts being related to the new structures of devolution, old grievances. In Baringo, we've been told some of them are related to historical injustices, people feeling, or they were victimized and isolated for a very long period of time. Now they feel it's time for them to assert their relevance and presence. I think all those issues must be addressed over and above what even the president himself has acknowledged. If we don't address the ballooning youth bulge, and then we'll definitely have the crisis of insecurity in that sea of hopelessness and unemployment. And for all of you who followed yesterday, you realized that we are really looking for all methods to resolve our issues, and we don't want this country to be driven to the Canyaris kind of option whereby people just seek funny fixes to their problems. So I think we're in the right position, but we need to think seriously about what to do with the massive hopelessness that then gives room for the radicalization of the youth in the coast, and also provides fodder for the North Rift, where people can just then feel that carrying a gun, then that makes them useful to society.
Or legitimizes what they seek to do. Commissioner?
For me, I think I want to emphasize one of the commitments that the government has already made, is that the government, if you look at the medium term, the plan, it has already committed itself to develop a security strategy, which would then be able to help in terms of dealing with the security situation in this country from a strategic perspective. Unfortunately, that is not being prioritized, and it must be prioritized, because when you have the breakdown of law and order that is happening in Kapedo, or as you saw yesterday in Mombasa, the people who suffer the biggest branch of the pain are the women and the children. And we must protect the women and the children. A category that is hardly seen are the elderly and those living with disability. It is very important for this nation to learn to respect the most vulnerable amongst us. We must be able to respect and develop a generation that sees law and order being very critical to the safety and development of this nation. The children in northern Kenya today are more militarized than the military itself at a very, very young age. And we need to ask ourselves what sort of generation we are developing in the north. With the devolvement of government, it therefore means that the national government has a key responsibility, together with the county governments, to ensure that services, including security, development of infrastructure, which is one of the contributors to insecurity, to be of paramount accessibility to the individuals. The pictures we saw yesterday from Mombasa are telling us a different story in terms of responding. There is no way a security agency can then unleash terror on innocent women and children. There are security mechanisms to deal with in terms of investigation. The intelligence should have been very clear where that threat was coming from, and not just doing an arbitrary security operation on the nearby members of the public. Therefore, it is very important that even as the government responds to threats of insecurity or actual attacks, it must do that within the law. It must do that within the law. And there is no compromise on that. It must be within the law. And that within the law affects from the head of state to the smallest person who is carrying the gun in any area of this country. So we must ensure that the law is respected, because if we abandon the law, then we are getting into a very dangerous situation, and all of us, including us who are seated in Nairobi City County, who may think that we are better off than the people of Kapedo or the people of Mombasa. We are all going to suffer. We are all going to suffer. And therefore we must take that commitment seriously as a nation, but work within the law.
Okay. That is it. Thank you. Thank you very much.